So we're just waiting for people to come into the seminar. Hello everybody, if you're in already. We've got blue sky up in Salford today. It was quite amazing.
Lovely.
The days and days of grey. What's it like down there?
Grey and gloomy. Well,
Nothingy.
yeah.
I'm just going to give people a couple more seconds and then I think we'll make a start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe we've got everyone we're going to have today. Okay, I'm going to make a start. Hello everyone, welcome to A Conversation With. My name is Emma Smith. I'm going to hand over to Hannah to introduce herself.
I am Hannah. I'm part of a research team at the University of Plymouth, which is running a project called DPACT, which Sarah will tell you about a bit more in a minute.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Griffiths. I'm also a research fellow on the same project as Hannah, based at Plymouth University, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that at the beginning of our presentation. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for agreeing to do this. So as I said, my name's Emma Smith. I work for a project called Empowered Conversations, which is a project of 6 degrees. We deliver communication courses for families and professionals around connecting better connecting with people with dementia. We also deliver one-to-one support for family carers in Salford. And during the pandemic, we have delivered a lot more online activities. So the seminars have been one of those. So this is our first one back since July. So please forgive me if I forget to press a button. But we've also been delivering lots of online sessions. We've had the disco, we've had singing, we've had brewing, we've had creative sessions, we've had a sensory farm. So we've thrown everything into the mix just to engage people and give people, I guess, something to look forward to. Got Gertie the cat just behind me. So at any time during the presentation from Hannah and Sarah, if you want to make a note of a question to ask them at the end, there's a Q&A function at the bottom. So if you haven't been on the seminar before, look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A. You can just type your question in there and then we'll pick those up at the end. If you haven't been on a seminar before, then it's perfectly fine that you don't see yourself. You will only see us. I'm sorry about that, but that's as it is. We've got a really nice mixed audience today, Hannah and Sarah. So we've got some practitioners, we've got some researchers, and we have some people affected by dementia. So hopefully we'll have a really good discussion after your presentation. Right at the end, I'm just going to set a poll just to see how you've all found the seminar. So literally, there's 2 questions on there, so I'm hoping it won't be too taxing for people and you could just give us a little bit of feedback about the seminar. And I think that's it from me. So I'm going to, with pleasure, hand over to Hannah and Sarah for their presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So we're really pleased to be here today. Hannah and I are going to talk about our evidence-based insights on the transition from delivering a dementia support worker intervention in person to this support being delivered entirely remotely. As we said, we're both researchers and we're part of a large project team. And we work also with some really lovely and dedicated practitioners who can't be here today, I don't think, unless they're out there somewhere. We'd like to start by saying thank you to them, especially Hayley, who we're going to be mentioning throughout this presentation. So I'm going to present initially, and then I'm going to hand over to Hannah. So to give you an outline of this talk, we're going to start with an explanation of the DPACT research project and the dementia support worker intervention that we're currently developing. We'll describe our approach to the research and discuss the switch from in-person to remote delivery. We're going to present some of our findings so far in terms of the experiences of people with dementia, carers and practitioners, based on evidence from various sources. And lastly, we'll cover the next steps for our project and also share some of our insights on the implications for dementia support in general. So you might be wondering what DPACT stands for. It stands for Dementia-Person Aligned Care Team, a 5-year research project funded by the National Institute for Health Research. We're based across 2 sites in the northwest and southwest of England, and we're developing and evaluating a complex dementia support worker intervention. Dementia support workers will be based in GP practices, but can visit people in their own homes. So previous studies have demonstrated potential benefits of having a named trusted individual based in a GP surgery, providing continuity of proactive support for people with dementia and carers. And support worker type roles, as you probably know, already exist in a variety of settings across the UK. However, although these are highly valued, post-diagnostic support is not available to all, and support that is available is often not strongly based in evidence or evaluated. So our aim is to develop an individualised, person-centred support intervention tackling a range of priorities for people with dementia and their carers to improve emotional and physical well-being. So on our project timeline here, the green arrow indicates where we're up to right now. The early development work was based on a number of sources of evidence, including literature and interviews with people with dementia, carers, and other experts in the field. This enabled us to develop a first version of an intervention manual and initial training for support workers and supervisors. And now we're in a feasibility phase where we're testing out our prototype intervention involving a small number of GPs practices, with 1 full-time support worker in the southwest and 1 in the northwest, learning from this and continuing to make ongoing developments to our intervention. We're also testing out the optimal background knowledge, experience and qualities of a support worker. And at the moment, we have a practitioner in the southwest who is a level 4 healthcare support worker with a background in dementia and an in-depth understanding of factors that can influence physical and mental health. Recruitment of people with dementia and carers for this feasibility phase was paused temporarily due to COVID and has recently started up again with extended time granted for this phase. The intervention continued to be delivered though in the southwest throughout the lockdown and beyond, and we'll come on to this shortly. Now, towards the end of the feasibility phase, we'll be able to make adjustments to our intervention and how it runs, ready for the final phase, which will involve trialling the intervention in a greater number of GP practices to test out its effectiveness. So probably the easiest way to explain the DPACT intervention is in the words of a brief information leaflet that the support worker talks through with clients. This is Hayley, our current Southwest support worker, and she's providing highly individualised support for both the person with dementia and carer for a period of up to 12 months for the purposes of this project, the frequency of which is negotiated with individuals based on their needs and preferences. And initially this was designed as mainly an in-person intervention because we had no idea what was coming up on the horizon. And this is how support workers explain the intervention to participants receiving it, setting up expectations. We'll work together to find out what matters to you. We'll think about things that are working well and things you want to change. If you think it'd be helpful, we'll come up with a plan of things to try. We can write this down or just talk about it. It'll be your plan, not mine. Part of the plan might be about how other people can help, including me. A plan can be changed as often as we like. If you want to, we can talk about the diagnosis and what it means for you. Often people find it helpful to talk about their thoughts and wishes. I won't tell you what to do, but I can give suggestions about some things like financial and legal matters. So what approach are we using to research this intervention? A highly traditional approach to evaluating interventions is to ask, does this intervention work? Does it have positive outcomes? The approach we're using, a realist approach, recognises that an intervention might not work for everyone and seeks to understand from the very beginning more about the mechanisms of what's going on to make it successful or not. developing theories about what could be going on under the surface, testing them out and refining those theories as we go along. A realist approach asks, how does it work or not work? Who does it work for? And under what circumstances might it work or go wrong? If we develop this in-depth understanding of how interventions vary in their effect and why, we're more able to enhance their effect, mitigate for things going wrong, and adapt the approach for different settings and circumstances. The methods we're using to gain a deeper understanding of the intervention include interviews, reflective diaries completed by support workers, recordings of real-time remote interactions, and accessible feedback forms for people with dementia and carers, which we've co-designed with our advisory groups comprising people with dementia, carers, and former carers. We're still in this feasibility phase of the research, and so far have gathered more data from those delivering the intervention than receiving it. We'll present findings today based on 3 key components of the intervention shown here. The style in which the intervention is delivered, or the overall approach to communication taken by support workers, developing a shared understanding with people about what their priorities are, what matters most to them, generating a plan of action with them, and the support worker collaborating with wider services and support networks in order to meet identified support needs. We are all the time taking into account the context under normal circumstances in which people with dementia and carers are receiving the support. We know from our prior research phase that due to early negative experiences of the diagnosis pathway and post-diagnostic support or lack of it, many lack trust in and feel cynical about what new support services might have to offer, often lacking hope that they'll be able to adapt and live well with dementia, and not believing they have choices or control over the situation. In terms of social connectedness, I'm sure everyone listening knows that dementia can be very isolating due to personal and societal stigma, leading to avoidance or protection from entering social spaces and difficulties negotiating the practical issues. And COVID-19 has presented us with a whole new context to explore, in which these existing contexts in the blue box are exacerbated. When we went into lockdown, feelings of lack of control and uncertainty rocketed, and opportunities to remain socially connected became extremely limited as services shut down. People have had less access to health and care services and are also reluctant to bother their GP at this time. This poses great risks to both mental and physical health. So when we went into lockdown, the intervention was being delivered in person, with the support workers visiting people's homes both in the southwest and northwest. Our project funders put DPACT on pause in that we were not able to recruit new people to the study. We were able to continue delivering the intervention remotely to those who had already been recruited, but only in the southwest. An added complication was that our Southwest support worker retired just before lockdown. So Hayley very ably took on the role in a challenging period where some of the clients had already got used to seeing someone else and had benefited from seeing him in person. We had to work within national and local NHS guidelines. For example, the Northwest were unable to continue delivering the intervention, and the support worker's supervisor had been redeployed. The NHS also has restrictions on which video conferencing platforms can be used with patients, with Attend Anywhere being the most secure privacy-wise. We worked really quickly to problem solve practicalities of which methods of remote support suited individuals and addressing access to technology. We kept participants aware of project changes and developed remote ongoing training sessions for both Hayley and the Northwest support worker. This enabled some knowledge sharing between them and also the researchers, and an opportunity for some peer support for them. Very early on, we developed and gave support workers access to an online folder where we collated some dementia-relevant COVID resources as we came across them, as more and more were being developed at that time, such as lists of useful organisations and websites, activities, easy read information, and help with explaining things like lockdown restrictions, video calls, and social distancing to people with dementia. In terms of adjustments to the intervention, we realised that there were paper-based resources we'd developed for support workers to share with the person with dementia and carer during sessions to support face-to-face conversations. We'd also placed emphasis on in-person communication skills. we would need to learn together with the support worker how these aspects could be adapted for remote delivery. There were some little changes evident from the beginning, like Hayley needing to repeat information more than she would do in person to check understanding. And we also sensed from the beginning that the focus might be on different aspects than those which we'd planned. With people feeling ever more isolated, there was more time given over to everyday conversation and reminiscence to keep people feeling connected. So we're now going to present some of our findings in relation to components of the intervention. In terms of style of delivery, 11 of the 13 clients have been able to set up with video conferencing. Others don't have internet access, so use the phone. But both systems seem to have been working quite well. Sometimes only the person with dementia or only the carer is involved in a session, sometimes both. In fact, once the carer went off for a lovely nap during the session. All have adapted really well to technology or have strengthened existing skills in this area. This has given people an experience of success in trying a new behaviour, increasing their sense of independence and taking control. And we hypothesize that this could lead to increased confidence to try out other new behaviours throughout the intervention. As the quote here on this slide illustrates, the continued support throughout COVID has been really highly valued, especially in the context of prior negative support experiences where many people may have felt abandoned post-diagnosis. With remote intervention, clients seem to have greater control over their own environment, which can lead to a really relaxed approach. They don't have to dress up, do all the welcoming things we normally do when someone comes around, make the support worker a cup of tea. But then again, remote interactions only provide a limited window into what's happening at home. And the support worker can be left feeling worried about what she may have missed and whether people are safe and well. She can't spot things she would normally look out for, like personal hygiene, reduction in mobility, wounds, bruising, and so on. Also on the flip side, people often like to be able to welcome people into their own home and look after them. It can be a really important way in which, especially people with dementia, can demonstrate their competence in socialising. So Hayley's found some ways to maintain person-centred interaction skills during remote meetings. For instance, when on a video call, she'll ask people to show her photos and other items around the house to talk about. But there are aspects that can interrupt relationship building. Technology failure, hearing difficulties can mean that in the middle of an in-depth, perhaps sensitive conversation, lines of communication are disrupted. We've all had experience of that with all these Zoom meetings. In person, these sorts of issues are easier to identify and rectify quickly, especially if there's a hearing loss. Whereas remotely, the listener might have to wait longer to point out that there's a problem and then backtrack quite a bit to repair it. Possibly also due to the remote nature of intervention, there can be a pressure to keep communicating and leave fewer silences. So a support worker could be tempted to provide too much information initially and risk overwhelming people. There are instances of the intervention becoming more directive than we'd planned, adjusting to COVID as being in a crisis, not just preparing for one. Hayley naturally prioritised encouraging people to engage with services and accept help. For instance, to undertake a care assessment or a GP review, as illustrated in this quote. Also, adjusting to the acute strain on carers at this time, the active support element became much more focused on carers, with interactions with people with dementia becoming more about everyday conversations. So the remote and the in-person versions of this intervention have played out really differently so far. We're now going to play you a brief audio clip of a conversation between Hayley and a couple she's working with. And just to set the context, just before this clip, she's been talking with the carer about photos of familiar people and how the person with dementia recognises the people but finds it hard to recall their names. Throughout the session, the lady with dementia walks away and then comes back to the device being used for the video call. Each time she comes back into view, Hayley quickly adapts her communication style to acknowledge and involve her, thereby keeping her engaged. Hayley knows that normally this lady likes to be with her husband all the time and prefers his attention on her. So Hayley works hard to ensure that the carer is able to stay with the call, and have the opportunity to tell his story and engage in the support. And this is just one example that we're going to play you.
So it's weird really, because when you think of it, all names of things she can't remember. Not only people with things.
Yeah.
But
Memory.
So knife and fork. She don't know what knife and fork is.
Yeah. Oh. Hello. Hello. Hello, darling. You're right.
So,
Don't do it properly.
Oh, does it not? Oh. Have you been dusting? Yeah. Oh. We're talking about photos. Do you like photos?
Yeah, nice ones.
Yeah. Of your holidays?
Oh, nice ones like that. Yeah, you can put them on there.
Yeah. Oh. Do you have photos around your home then as well?
No, I don't have that many. I don't have them, but I have these ones here.
A few little ones. Oh.
They're nice people.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
He's all right.
coming back to this memory business.
Okay, so you can hear there at the end that the carer kind of brings the topic back to what they've been discussing about before. And the lady with dementia, I think, went off to do something else again. So now I'm going to hand over to Hannah to talk further about some of our findings.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm just going to apologise in advance. My puppy has just decided to go under the desk and is gnawing at it as I speak. So if you hear funny sounds, that's what's going on, or my face changes. Okay. So another core strategy of the DPACT intervention is to develop shared understanding between the support worker, carer and person with dementia. Examples of focal points for shared understanding within the DPACT intervention include shared understanding of what is working well for the clients, what is not working so well, and what they want to do about this. A shared understanding of the condition itself, how it impacts the client's lives and how it will impact them in the future, and what they want to do in terms of planning ahead. And a shared understanding of what support is available by various organisations, what is relevant to them, and how they can access it. So Sarah has spoken about some of the delivery styles used remotely by Hayley, which have helped shared understanding to be achieved remotely. There are two other strategies specific to developing shared understanding that I just want to focus on here. The first one is the support worker offering to correspond with the carer via email in between meetings, and the support worker sending out information which can help foster shared understanding before meetings. Prior to lockdown, support workers did not correspond with carers over email, but its use during lockdown has had two major benefits. First of all, it's helped give Hayley, the support worker, a clearer sense of what the clients would like to talk about and address during their meetings. In pre-COVID recorded DPACT meetings, we observed that there was no clearly communicated agenda for the meeting, which the support worker and clients came up with together. Instead, the meetings would be built around a set of routine topic points and led by everyday conversation about recent events in the client's lives. While everyday conversation is really important and we would not advocate a highly structured approach to the meetings, there was sometimes the sense that the purpose and outcome of the meeting was somewhat missing. Carers' emails potentially enable clients to have the space to co-create the agenda with the support worker prior to the meeting, giving them an understanding of what matters to them rather than them having to express everything they want to talk about in response to an open question at the start of the meeting, when they may be both distracted by other things happening. A second benefit is that email correspondence has given carers the opportunity to share how they are really feeling and about their perspectives about recent events without worrying about how that disclosure might affect the person with dementia, if it may aggravate their already feelings of being a burden, for example. As a DPACT intervention is intended to support both carers and people with dementia, it has been great to see that carers have been able to disclose to the support worker what matters to them in this way and enhance the support worker's understanding of their needs. During a home visit, carers have sometimes used moments, opportunistic moments, such as saying goodbye at the door, or if there's a toilet or a tea break, to disclose something that matters to them about how they're feeling. But such moments don't always present themselves, and even when they do, it just gives the carer only a little chance to share something, and there's always the risk of the person with dementia overhearing. While the email correspondence has been great, we have had to be aware of the extra workload this has placed on the support worker and the time it takes to respond to emails. So we've had to think about how she can juggle that with other activities as in the intervention. We've also had to be aware of an over-reliance on the support worker. So recently, Hayley received an email from somebody who was at quite a crisis point and had been drinking quite a lot of alcohol in the early hours of the morning. And it was great that they could reach out to Hayley, but just to make sure there's that maintained support network of crisis management teams, etc., for that person to access. And we've also got to be aware of still ensuring that the person with dementia's voice is also giving a presence in the meeting, and there's that balancing of both perspectives. The second strategy of fostering shared understanding that I was going to talk about was the sending out of leaflets and intervention plans between meetings. And on the whole, this has worked really well, especially in the case of the support worker sending out the Alzheimer's Society This Is Me booklet for clients. This is a booklet where people with dementia can record details of themselves when they may, especially, it can be useful, especially if they have difficulties expressing themselves. And it can help professionals understand them as a person and tailor their care for that person. And by Hayley giving these leaflets out, either by email or in the post, the clients have been able to have a chance to work on these during lockdown. And many people with dementia have enjoyed completing these and have even included their own pictures and additional bits of information. And writing in these booklets has also helped trigger some anticipatory care planning discussions with the clients actually building on the This Is Me booklet to bring up matters relating to this. Actually, in in-person meetings, these conversations have usually had to be driven by the support worker and have sometimes been initiated at a time when the clients haven't really been ready to talk about these type of future plans. However, there are some instances of where it has not worked so well. For example, the support worker sent out a completed plan to clients via email. The intention of this document was to record what was working well already, as well as to some agreed actions to work on in the future. But this intention of recording what was working well may not have been communicated as well as it could be, or may have been forgotten by the carer. So when she read the summary of what they were already doing, she actually found it as quite condescending and was quite confused about why they weren't focusing on what needed to be done rather than what was already being done. And it's just important to bear in mind that if that plan had been written out whilst the support worker was actually with the clients, or if they had talked through it during a remote session where the intention of the plan could have been reiterated, this misunderstanding might not have happened. So moving on to a major benefit of shared understanding being achieved during COVID was that the fact that support workers and clients have been able to adapt or create new meaningful goals that were possible during COVID and then work together to accomplish them. The quote I've presented here on this slide from the support worker nicely illustrates one example of this. And this continued but adapted approach to goal setting work has helped give clients a sense of control over their lives during a time when their freedom has been severely restricted. Another benefit has been that by the support worker ensuring that their clients' situations are understood, known and addressed during COVID by themselves and other professionals, potential gaps in care have been filled during this vulnerable time. This work has also involved ensuring that clients also have a shared understanding of how and when they should seek support during COVID, emphasising the need to take action if things change to try and prevent minor issues from escalating during a time when things might not be picked up so easily. The extract I'm about to play shows a nice example of the support worker positively feeding back to the clients on how well they've been doing during COVID, reinforcing the coping strategies and control they've developed during lockdown, but also accompanying this with some guidance on what to do if things change.
Too bad. It's better on
Absolutely not. Compared to the start, when we first met, and what you two have gone through is amazing. You've done brilliantly. Don't forget that. Don't forget how far you've come. Because it's only been, what, March isn't it, that we started speaking, and that's the time that you were a little bit unwell then, weren't you? So from that time, you've done brilliantly.
Yeah, she was going through a bad patch and she needed something and I didn't know what, and the pills that they prescribe or helping her.
Brilliant. And you must let us know if there's any changes, because there is medication that can help with that sort of distress. So don't just let us know. But it's good it's helped, hasn't it, for both of you?
Sorry. But one challenge that has arisen from the support worker working so hard to try and ensure that they have a shared understanding of the client's needs, and that the clients fully understand what support is available to ensure that this level of support during COVID doesn't become too overwhelming for some clients who've already had a lot to think about and contend with during lockdown. One couple did feel too burdened by the level of support they were receiving through DPACT, perhaps in part due to the focus on them driving the content of the meeting with the what matters to you rather than I think you should X approach by the support worker. They consequently withdrew somewhat from the intervention and are currently receiving email support rather than meeting regularly, which is still an important connection. This has been an important learning curve for the project, with it being key that the support worker remains alert to client strain and eases off when needed, recognising that COVID and other events in the future may temporarily affect their readiness and ability to implement change, but leaving the door open for a time when they are ready to re-engage. Another area of work that we're continuing to work on, which is very related to the COVID context, is exploring when it's more appropriate for the support worker to be a bit more directive on what the clients could or should do, and when they should keep a bit more of a client-driven approach, responding to what the clients identify as important, unless it would be harmful not to be a bit more directive. Part of this work involves examining how decisions about what approach to take can be best negotiated with clients or identified by the support worker by picking up on relevant cues and contexts. So moving on to the last DPACT intervention that we're going to talk about here, collaboration. Throughout lockdown, we've observed examples of the support worker fostering successful new links with other services, despite or maybe because of COVID. For example, Hayes been working very closely with Age UK to make sure that the processes needed to give clients access to benefits has still been underway during lockdown. She's also worked with social workers and social prescribers. But Hayley has also reported concern about signposting onto third sector or charity services who may, due to fluctuating restrictions on how people can interact during lockdown, may at risk of suddenly having to close down. And this disappointment could potentially reinforce existing feelings of being let down by services and a lack of hope that things can change for them. There have been some amazing accounts of the support worker alerting GPs and other professionals to things they've become aware of during remote interactions, which has led to possible aversions of developing crises. The quote provided details such a case. Another case has been where Hayley picked up on a person with dementia exploring hallucinations and facilitated a quick referral onto the older people's mental health team, which resulted in a medication change and the hallucinations ending. Access to the GP surgery's IT systems to write and review notes at some surgeries has really supported this collaboration, but that hasn't been available at all surgeries. And there has been this risk of the support worker becoming quite isolated and reduced collaboration opportunities because they haven't had that presence within the surgeries, not been able to attend multidisciplinary team meetings or just have that catch up over a coffee. Okay, so that's sort of the end of our summary findings from remote working, and I'm just going to take the time to quickly go back to some of the content of Sarah's earlier slide. So on the left here, we've got some of the existing issues and situations that we're aware of clients may have faced prior to starting DPACT. And then in the middle, we've got the principles of the intervention that we talked about and have shown some findings on. And then on the right-hand side, if we just map on some of the findings we have just presented, we can see an emerging theory developing about how remote intervention support has been working. So, for example, some clients had a lack of trust in services before joining DPACT, perhaps due to a difficult diagnostic experience or a sudden reduction in support. But through ongoing support provided by remote interactions, the clients have begun to build trust in health services again, and this could have a knock-on effect for their engagement with other services. Clients may have had felt a lack of control over their lives, and COVID could have made that worse. But because they've been supported by Hayley to make small changes and seen those realised during lockdown, and also been able to control their own environment when interacting with a professional, which sometimes bring a different power dynamic into interactions, they've been able to regain some control and feel empowered to try some new behaviours which could continue post-lockdown. So sorry about that. So just on to next steps. One next step is for us to fully explore the theory behind how DPACT's remote support works, for whom and in what circumstances, more fully with continued data collection, especially from the people with dementia and carer themselves. This analysis will be conducted alongside our analysis of the in-person version of the intervention, looking at similarities, differences and crossover learning for both versions of the intervention. So, for example, we will be still sending out the This Is Me booklet to clients so they have a chance to think about some of these things and present who they are before meeting with Hayley and bringing up some of these issues and other support workers. We'll be encouraging Hayley to still correspond with carers over emails, although bearing in mind some of the issues that go alongside this. We'll also start looking at the outcomes of the intervention too, in terms of on health, well-being, quality of life. And based on this ongoing learning, we will continue to adapt both versions of the intervention until we reach the trial, including the communication tools which facilitate it so that they're both suited to the different context. I picked this picture here with various directions of the arrows, as I just wanted to emphasize we're not going back to the intervention as it was when it was delivered in person or carry on just with the remote version of the intervention, but instead we're increasing our options of how to work in clients in ways that works best for them. So a bit of a hybrid approach. So if people still want to remotely interact, even though they have got the option of doing in person, that's still something that they can do. One area of interest will be looking at when people who have been working remotely with the support worker start having in-person meetings and how that changes the intervention content and interactions. Our training will also focus on addressing the potential negative repercussions of remote working. So as I mentioned earlier, the email issue we've started reviewing Hayley's time records, looking for how remote working changes, how much time she's having to spend and has time with clients. And building up a really realistic picture of what a caseload can look like for a support worker, both in remote times and in when they can do in-person interactions. We're also going to look at the risk of mitigate the risk of having a limited window into clients' lives. Could informal versions of the risk assessment questionnaire be embedded into the conversation in a natural way? Or could presentations of certain ailments be encouraged during the video call, if appropriate to do so? Or could engaging the clients in certain activities that could show up areas of concern be possible during the calls and be helpful? We're also going to try and enhance communication practices between surgeries and the support workers. So we've created a leaflet detailing how the support worker, what their role is and how they can work with other professionals, and starting to distribute that. We're also trying to make sure that any remote MDTs that are happening, that Hayley is invited to them, and place more insistence on Hayley and other support workers involved in DPACT having access to the GP's IT system once everybody's up and running again. So just to move on to the implications for dementia support in general. Next slide, please, Sarah. I think our research is really highlighting that there needs to be continued support nationally for support workers to operate during lockdown situations such as COVID, as well as during normal times. And this learning could also have implications for other situations and where professional support workers need to interact with people with other situations which require remote interactions, as people living in rural situations. We're also going to look at and trying to share the learning for our training material for other professionals engaged in remote working within the dementia field, focusing on specific communication practices that help facilitate the intervention delivery in remote settings. The study has also identified some gaps in care. So we've learnt from carers and people with dementia that whilst they're in person and remotely, there's been some support groups available for carers. There haven't been any groups for them to attend that are for both people with dementia and carers, and communicating these insights to relevant people. So that's it from me. Just want to thank you for your time today and for listening. We've got our contact details here. If you don't have a question that you present today but have one in the future, please do and get in touch with us. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Sarah. I think they've had a chance to make a note of that now. So are you all right to bring us back to the full screen, please, Sarah?
Sure.
Sorry again for the dog.
The dog just made it more interesting, and that's what life is about, isn't it?
It's really entertaining.
Entertaining. You didn't know that I had a cat. There was a cat pushing me off my chair. I had to have a little battle with the cat. I was just wondering, is Hayley based at just what with one GP, or is she across a few GPs?
She's based in 3 GP surgeries, and under normal circumstances, if she was going about her business, she would have an office in one of them, but she'd cover participants from 3 surgeries. Yeah, basically.
Oh, and because I'm nosy, people know I'm nosy. Where was the one in the northwest? What area was that in?
Manchester.
Is it Manchester?
I know, Greater Manchester. Yeah.
Okay. I wondered if you could just share. Sometimes I find it easier to hear like a story of like somebody who's received this support. So could you share a story of someone who just stands out in your mind of where the online support has actually been really beneficial? Can you just bring anyone to mind?
I just leave that for you, Hannah, if you wanted to answer that. But...
Left herself on mute. She's leaving it.
Yeah.
Adoring dog.
Okay, so there's been, I guess there's some examples, not specific ones, but where there's been some ongoing issues which may have been pushed to the side. So there was a real disagreement between a person with dementia and the carer about smoking behaviour, but the lockdown situation was able to give them a chance to really take a step back and take that issue slowly and work through it to reach a shared understanding of each other's perspectives on it, which Hayley was able to negotiate and come up with a plan ultimately that would work for everybody about that smoking behaviour, understanding that the carer was concerned about the risk of if they weren't around and something being set alight, but for the carer, for the person with dementia, it was their sort of thing that they were looking forward to and enjoying and still had some control over. And there's also, I guess, what I was highlighting is some of these really, if Hayley hadn't had these interactions with clients during lockdown and they hadn't been able to see the GP, there's been some really severe instances of like the hallucinations, but also a gentleman's leg deteriorating, and he hadn't been able to have video calls with the GP, but was able to show Hayley, and then she was able to really stress the importance of this to the GP. So just two on the top of my head, but
thank you.
Taking things slowly, which might not have been able to have done in person at home.
Thank you for that. I've just been waiting for one of the legs of your table just to be gnawed all the way through and the whole thing just to drop. So we've got another 17 minutes. Hold in, people, that might still happen. Not had that happen before. One of the things that we noticed around empowered carers was when we went to working from home to deliver that, so that's one-to-one support, was that there was more sharing from carers when it was out of a clinical setting. So it was obviously one house to another house, so it changed the dynamic of the relationship. It didn't feel clinical. I mean, like by clinical they would have just been in a small room, but it still looked clinical. They didn't have photos around. It didn't feel like someone's home. And I just wondered if Hayley had noticed that there was sort of a different connection because it wasn't, you know, in a GP surgery.
I think because, like, under normal circumstances, the support workers are visiting people's homes, then it might not be so much that it's not based in that sort of clinical setting. But I think maybe that's something we can explore. But just thinking now, it might be that because the person isn't going along with lots of bits of paper and taking notes, and the person with dementia and care can't see them taking lots of notes about the discussion, maybe that gives it more of a sort of informal, friendly type vibe to the meetings, and there's probably going to be lots of benefits from that. But we have noticed some sort of drawbacks from the sort of focusing on the sort of friend. Obviously they're going to be friendly, but the support worker almost seeming more like a befriender than someone that's there to kind of draw in support from different services. So we have noticed that with some participants, that they've started to see the support worker as just more of a befriender, someone to come along and have a conversation, and perhaps not fulfilling the actual purpose of the intervention. So we've grappled about kind of how much that actually matters.
That's really interesting. Yeah, just those different boundaries and just
Yeah.
Thank you for that. We've got a few questions coming through, so I think we're going to throw it out to our attendees. I should have said Beth right at the beginning said, lovely to see you all and thank you for the invite. Thanks, that's Beth Goss. So Lizzie, do we know Beth? Do you know Beth?
She came to help us with our support worker training.
Oh, nice.
We're on nursing, yeah.
Okay, so Lizzie, I'll start with Lizzie because she's the first one to get a question in. Did the support workers need more training, support and supervision when working virtually instead of face-to-face?
If I tackle the supervision one first, so there was an issue that we had to address, that the support worker's supervisor was redeployed and because of COVID had to go on the ward. So actually Sarah and I had to step in and give maybe some informal support, which we wouldn't be able to do in the trial, but as part of this it was important to keep those connections going. But one benefit is, as things settled down, the supervisor and the support worker actually developed some more informal meetings, so it would become more frequent that Hayley could just pick up the phone and talk to her rather than waiting for the scheduled more formal meetings. And it's been interesting looking at the benefits of those two different styles. In terms of training, we have been doing some Zoom training sessions on interactional issues and topics with the support workers across both sites, which has been a benefit of working more remotely and trying to bring in their experiences. And hopefully as the other support workers in the Northwest begin to start working now, things are relaxed a bit, we'll be able to share some more accounts together, but that's definitely something we're carrying on with. And in our manual, we also have now a dedicated section on remote, delivering it remotely as well as the in-person function.
Just wanted to add as well that I think right from the very beginning, we've tried to set up with the practitioners that they're sort of in this research with us and we're really learning from them. And I think that's really helped because we've had 2 face-to-face big training sessions with them. And it has been very much a kind of knowledge exchange. So I think this building up that relationship with the practitioners and researchers from the beginning has just been absolutely key.
Yeah, there's some things as researchers you won't know until you hear from the practitioner actually delivering it. So having that close relationship's been really key. And again, Hayley's been brilliant with that. Really keep this up.
Brilliant. Lizzie's also asked about is this an intervention, or is it based on existing research that's out there, or is it research that you guys have worked on? What's behind this intervention?
That's a really good question, but the answer is probably it's both. That the research came about because we've already got dementia support workers, sometimes they're called dementia navigators, advisors, and there has been research on this style of support delivery. But I think the problem is that there isn't any really strong evidence of their effectiveness. So if we're going to, this type of support worker is really valued, we know that, but until there's some really strong research evidence that it has effectiveness and improves people's quality of life, then it's very difficult for them to be commissioned and funded. So it's based on previous research of what we already know. There's also literature out there that we've used to inform the first version of our intervention, but we're also doing our own new primary research to inform it and keep developing it and refining it and improving it as we go along. So yeah, the answer is both those things, and we're using any evidence that we can that's out there.
Yeah, just to highlight that we've got, the recordings of the DPACT session in practice. We've got the interviews with practitioners and the people receiving the intervention. And we've also got like the quantitative side of it, the questionnaires and things that go out, and PPI, involvement from people with relevant backgrounds, people with experience of caring, people with dementia have also really inputted, and that's been included in our intervention development as well.
Brilliant, thank you. What sort of measures are you using to, what are you using to capture this, the benefit of this intervention? So obviously there's some qualitative stuff with the interviews, but
yeah, so we've got measures like the DEMQual, and it's really looking at quality of life and well-being, but we are interested in looking at maybe in the trial, this is, I'm not committing myself to anything here, but looking at some of these emerging theories around hope and trust and control, and maybe looking at ways of combining the qualitative findings with some measures of that as well.
So in the feasibility phase, we're much more concerned with showing that there's feasibility to go forward to a trial rather than measuring long-term outcomes, which we won't have yet. But obviously we're looking at some outcomes through our qualitative work, some immediate outcomes from things that have been happening in the intervention. But yeah, these are really big questions that we have for the trial, and which measures we actually use, ongoing dilemmas for the research project.
brilliant, thank you both. So Beth has asked the question, she said a comment and a question. It's really great to hear all the much needed support going on and the increased collaboration. And she said, will all the potentially missed cases, if DPACT had not been there, be shared in the study? It's really interesting to see these outcomes.
Oh, I was leaving that for Hannah.
Yeah, no, that would be an interesting way. We'll have to, it's a really good point in terms of trying to collate that. We've been thinking about trying to use the GP's note system and trying to look at that interaction, the notes that Hayley's put down, and then the actions that the GP's done as a way to sort of quantify these personal accounts that we get through the qualitative data. But yes, it will be, if we can try and document that, that would be really good. Good point, Beth.
This might be a little bit related, but also just naturally, there's a system that's developed where the supervisor has the first contact, either with or without the support worker, just to kind of double check if there's any safeguarding issues that need to be addressed immediately. And that's proved to be really effective, so we'll probably continue throughout the intervention now. We probably built that in as one of the strategies. So the supervisor is picking up any sort of issues that might have been missed or unmet really quickly as well.
Did you at any point think, you know, when COVID kicked in and you thought, oh, this is not going as we planned it, who knew COVID was coming along, we want to do this, we want it to be face to face, we want them to be like around the GPs and in that environment? Do you ever think, actually, we're just going to pause this until we get out of this pandemic, whenever that will be? Or were you always like, okay, we've hit this obstacle, how do we get over it?
I think for the first 5 minutes, it was like, right, everything stopped. But I think just very quickly, we realized there was potential to carry it on. And a lot of people might feel kind of really doubtful about whether people with dementia in particular could use technology, could use remote methods. And maybe that's why this hasn't happened before, but it's been forced on us, and it's working really well in a lot of cases. Sorry, Hannah, you were going to say something as well.
I was just going to say, you know, there was the concern about sort of the bureaucratic processes as well, but actually the changes in ethics committees and things really helped facilitate us getting up and ready. I think there was a real recognition that if support can be given, let's carry on and do it.
It's been more of a process getting ethical permission to carry on with recruiting to the study. But we've done it, and we've developed remote methods of recruitment, which again, like, nobody would have thought of we could do with people with dementia and carers. So yeah, it's incredible what this is forced on us.
Yeah, I was just going to, sorry, I interrupted you. I was just going to say it could potentially lead to more inclusion for recruitment as well. Now we can do it remotely, so it's quite exciting to see how it's going to move forward with that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely, like, we've definitely felt it. It's pushed our boundaries. It's pushed us to think about, you know, approaching things in totally different ways. Things that we wouldn't have planned to do, like in this year, we've brought forward and done much quicker. And I know from speaking to colleagues, they've had a similar sort of experience, that it's not given us all a kick up the bum, because I think we all work really hard doing what we do, but it has pushed us into new spaces, and I think that's to the benefit of people, because I can only like think of those people who have been part of this study. Had they not had that support worker at a working remotely, you know, who would they have had? Would they have had anybody? You know, just that support during COVID, I imagine, has been immense for some of those people affected by dementia.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wish it could be like provided for all people, but you know, that's the only frustration, because we're in a study, we've got limited numbers and, you know, limited length of time that the intervention can be delivered. But our ultimate aim is this will be rolled out more widely.
Brilliant. Okay, well, our questions have dried up, but I feel like we've had a good discussion, and we've sort of had to dig around. Oh, look, there's my dog. There's my dog there, just appeared behind my shoulder. So thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on and giving your time to share this work. It's been really interested to find out more about the research, and you know, if we're still doing seminars in a few years' time, then we can come back and we can find out. We get to come back and we'll do it all again.
Yeah, definitely. We'd love to.
That'd be amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for staying on the seminar. We're not going quite as mad as we did before the summer holidays, so our next one will be the 23rd of September, and it's a conversation with our creatives. So these are the different people who have worked with Empowered to put on online engagement sessions, from a sensory farm to a disco, all over the place. So they're going to share their experience of moving from the face-to-face to the virtual, and sort of the good things, the bad things, the lessons learned, and tips and advice for people. So thank you, everybody. Let me see, this is another, oh, Beth said thank you all. Beth's so lovely.
Oh, Beth.
Okay, so thank you everyone. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Sarah. Bye-bye.